Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our 9th roundtable. My name is Doug. I'm one of the co-founders of Intelligent People. And if you don't know of us already, we're a specialist product recruiter with close to 20 years experience recruiting product talent up to board level. We provide permanent and interim services, both contingency and executive search, across product ops, product design, product management up to CPO level. Please go to our website if you'd like to see current live roles or have further information. The theme today is burnout in product, and we have 4 speakers who are going to share their thoughts. It's a slightly different format to previous ones as we're all together like a fireside chat, so we're hoping that the tech works. We've broken this down into 4 segments. To start with, what is burnout? Secondly, how to avoid burnout in a high-performing environment. Toxic environments versus individual factors, and then how to spot signs of burnout in your team. We're lucky enough to have 4 really senior product leaders today who have all coached teams or individuals who've been suffering from burnout. We have Adrian Angus Pullman, Evie Brockwell, Izzy Rafi, and Shannon Vets. Perhaps if you could give a brief introduction to yourself in that order, starting with Adrian, and then we'll kick off. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Doug. It's really lovely to be here. I'm very excited to talk about this topic because it's a serious one that we need to pay a lot of attention to. So I'll kick off. I began my career before the internet working in professional kitchens. They're high intensity environments. And then from there, that also allow you to recover it quickly. And I think recovery is something we want to talk about today. Since 1998 or so, I've been working on product management, travel, distribution on the internet. And most recently, 16 years at Booking.com, where I was senior director. I'm about to move into an executive role at Springer Nature, which is academic publishing. Over my career, I've coached a lot of teams through really high intensity periods, and some of those have tipped into burnout, including some folks in my teams that I would consider my strongest. So my interest here is really not so much theoretical and more like I've watched this happen, I've helped people come back from it, and I've been there myself. And so I'm super glad to be here with this group of really smart people. Thanks.
Evie?
Yeah, me too. Honestly, it's a really good group of people, and I'm sure we'll have loads of great chats on burnout. I'm leading product operations and experimentation at New Look. And before that, I was freelance for a few years and started coaching. I ended up coming into the burnout space because I found that the majority of people that I was coaching were struggling with burnout in product. So I carried out research with over 200 product people, and I've since spoken to over 1,000 product people about burnout and the impact that it has on them. So yeah, I'll be able to share a bunch of stats, insights, and things that have really helped people in this world as we go through the next hour.
Hi, Izzy.
Hi all. Super excited to be talking about this topic. This is a great panel. Hopefully we'll have really great conversation, and I would hope everyone comes here to be honest and open about it. The more we talk about it, the more we can amplify and find great solutions. I'm a product leader with over 15 years of experience. I specialize in business transformation, growing and scaling product teams, and this is a prime space for team burnout. My experience is very commercially aggressive environments, e-commerce and transformation pieces at scale. And so when I go in when it's really, really tough to a business. For example, a reorg, maybe a high pressure delivery cycle, really the points where everything is under strain. And so my experience is very deeply rooted in helping organization change the system so that people can operate in an environment that enables them to high perform sustainably, rather than kind of, just focusing on how we can help people. So my interest is very much in that, how we can create sustainable environment for people to truly shine and to take that people on a journey as the company evolves. So excited to hear your thoughts about that.
And Shannon.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here as well. And thank you so much for inviting me to this conversation. I'm extremely passionate about this topic. So I've been working in product and tech for over 20 years. Today, I feel the real privilege to be CEO and CPO of Usersnap, which is a company that helps collect, analyze, and drive product decisions through insight. And over that 20-year span, I have myself suffered from burnout. And I've also taken over several teams that were clearly many members in burnout. Even in my own team right now, for health reasons, people experience it, and you have to know how to deal with that as a leader. So if there's one thing I really want to help with today, it's transmitting both the experience from the individual contributor side and what leaders can do about that, and how we can really support and understand people going through that difficult time.
Great, thank you, everybody. So I think we're going to start off with our opening segment, which is what is burnout? So the dictionary definition is extreme tiredness or mental or physical illness caused by working too hard or trying to do too much. I'm really interested to hear people's thoughts on this, because I think if we can define what it is, we can then use that as a platform to move forward. So over to the floor. What is burnout?
I'd like to grab onto something Izzy said earlier in our pre-up. Burnout isn't an individual failing; it's a system failing. In that systems, especially for product people function almost as a neural network in a sense. And so when you have when an individual starts to burn out, you can see that that's actually a pressure on the system that is then extensively going to get spread across your wider system, and then the overall system will fail. So for me, it's about a system losing its ability to recover. So like tired, you can fix with a vacation or even with a weekend if you're in catch it early enough. But burnout is really a gap between effort and recovery. And I think the effort that we expect, especially from high-performing teams, that we reward from high-performing teams, leads to total system failure if it's not managed appropriately.
Okay.
Yeah, and then latching onto that, I think there's a lot of people that I've worked with that have struggled to identify whether they've just been really stressed or burnt out. And I think it can be this like really fine balance of being like, oh, well, was it that bad? Because we all try to say like, oh, I'm going to be okay. I just need a little break. And the way that I've described it to a lot of people that resonates the most is that if you imagine you've got a stress scale from 0 to 10, and if you're operating at that high end of the stress scale, so say 8 to 10 for a long period of time, you eventually get to the point where that's just either too much. So like Adrian says, you just don't have enough recovery in that and you never go back down that stress scale. So you stay in that space and then you can burn out. Or often people sit in that top range and then something else happens in life. And it's not just about work. It's like other life factors can happen where something could happen in your family. It could happen with your health. It could just be an extra thing at work that then tips you off the edge of that scale. And typically people will know that they've burnt out if they've been through a period where they felt like really foggy, really emotional all the time. They don't feel like they've got the right sense of themselves. They feel like they're a little bit lost. Like they're all signs that you're there. But I'm always like, don't try and pay attention to those signs. Try and pay attention to the signs beforehand, the ones that start to indicate that you have been stressed and you have been staying in that stress state for a long period of time, because that's when you need to make the changes before it's too late.
I think that there's something that we overlook a lot about burnout, and that is the symptom of motivation. Just simply feeling like, oh, I have to do this today. Exhaustion and lack of recovery. I fully support the previous, brilliant ladies who raised these points. I will raise just not wanting to. A key factor, and that could be because you're misaligned fundamentally with the work that is being asked of you, and that can in and of itself trigger burnout. But also there's this like constant feeling of like, why am I even doing this? This is pointless. It's misaligned with values or misaligned with my skills. This is not the work that I want to be doing. If you're feeling that like consistently, this could also be a sign of burnout, because motivation is something that requires energy. And if you're lacking that, that could be a sign.
When you say a misalignment to a role, do you mean someone's just doing the wrong job, or the job has changed and it's something that they're, I don't want to say not capable of, because that's the wrong language, but that they're struggling to do? Is that what you're talking about, or?
It could be. I mean, I think it takes several forms. I'll give you the one that I see the most is that something in their personal life or their health has shifted. And this has triggered a need for the role that they're in to adapt. People, I see the most burnout in the highest performers. So usually it's not that they're not capable, it's not they're not willing or trying, it's that something changed in their environment. And a lot of times I see that in a personal context. Maybe like the ratio that I'm thinking is like 60-40 here. So not all the time, but there's a little bit of a majority that like something personally changed and now it's like they need to adjust. And then the other 40% of the time, it is the role that has changed. So maybe we have changed the context, or the context of the business could also change, and that's triggering additional pressure or a shift in your responsibilities that makes the job harder, or that just maybe makes it maladapted to you and your gifts. So that too can happen. So I don't want to say it's this or that. It's really, it depends on the person, it depends on the context, but I will say this universally, context changing can trigger burnout, where you start a job and you're like, yeah, this is great, I love it, it's perfect for me. But then maybe down the line, something happens and it kind of like a new reality forms and you have to adjust the workload or the work type to what you're doing. So it's either personal or work context, but it's one of the two, if not both.
How does the panel feel about it being related to achieving success? Because I've worked with lots of high performers, and I tend to find, you know, when someone has a bad running recruitment, you know, it's like tacking into the wind. It's horrific. It affects self-esteem and everything. And people either sort of dig in and just kind of get through it. And then when they're successful again and making lots of placements, they're a completely different person. They're super happy, motivation's high. Some people, you know, they're tacking in the wind too long and they're just like, I just can't do this. I've got to change the environment. And I wonder, would you say that's burnout, or is that just that failure's tough to deal with and success is easy to deal with? Is it I don't know, is it a factor, do you think, or?
I mean, it comes down to that motivation piece, and like there is a huge element of feeling like you're successful giving you energy. And a lot of burnout, there's a couple of things. It's like burnout isn't necessarily your capacity to not be able to do things. It's not that you're not capable, it's not anything else. It's that you often are trying to do stuff and you're not getting the same reward back. So either you're not aligned with the values, you're not getting the energy from that work, like you're not feeling like your efforts are being recognized by other people. That's a strong thing that a lot of people cite in terms of like what leads them to feel that way. And so much of that is obviously perception. So there is a degree of like, you can change perception on these things, but it's a far easier if you feel like you're doing well. But it also goes back to one of the points that I think Shannon and Adrian were making before, was that we also typically reward cultures where people are performing well. And that's not necessarily a good thing either. I don't think that means that people are then not going to burn out. So yeah, there's probably a lot more to be said on this one.
And a lot of that, by the way, is luck. You know, I think that it's interesting. We tend to reward extreme effort only if it's lucky enough to have been the right hypothesis at the right time with the right results. And then if for whatever reason that luck doesn't land with you, you have a couple of options, I guess. And one is to be resilient and then say, well, I'm just going to keep trying and the luck will come eventually. And another is to sort of feel that you're in a double bind. It doesn't matter which way you go, you're not able to move forward, and the bar keeps going up. And I think that can be it's easy to get the two confused, to be honest. And I think we tend to as a society here in the state that we're in right now, have a tendency to assume for a long time that hard work equated with success. And the harder you worked, the more success you got. But actually what I'm finding in the last like few years even is that hard work and success are often not equated with each other at all. There's a whole lot of good fortune mixed in, and effort does not always equate to outcomes. So that creates a cognitive dissonance that I think is causing a lot of escalation of burnout, because you have folks that I've managed people who've got multiple master's degrees, for example. They're fresh off academia. They were stellar students. They hit the workplace and things aren't necessarily just ticking over as they always have been, and they lose their sense of self. And I think that's again a misalignment of everything, that all of the rules that I've lived by, all the values that I thought were, my keys to success have been taken away from me. And I think that can be quite a difficult place to be. And again, it's something that we as leaders need to recognize and encourage, that, it's okay for things not to go perfectly. We see your effort, and we acknowledge that you really are doing the best you can. I think that's important to bring up.
I think one last point just on high performers, it's worth remembering that they're very self-motivated, right? Their personal value is really getting to that end goal that they've been chasing. They're usually really capable, really knowledgeable, really self-motivated, don't necessarily need the system to incentivize them, right? They would just go and do it because they love that high, the dopamine high of I've done this. And we take that for granted. A lot of organizations take that for granted, even more so they lean into it because these people, they don't need a lot of hands-on management. You just set them and then they will just deliver to the highest standards consistently. And they get themselves on that roller coaster where recovery doesn't exist because they're just chasing the next dopamine high from I made this, I achieved this. And it's not a lot always about look at me. It's just I can do this. I'm really good and I can perform. So they're driven by performance, naturally driven. And these are the people that are really hiding within the system because you wouldn't look at them twice, right? They always look great. They're always going, delivering, bringing value to the business. As a manager, you feel like, oh, hands off because they can go and take care of themselves. And you're not really checking in with these people in a meaningful way. You're not asking, you're never going to ask them, have you burned out, right? The questions you would ask them are very, very different. Like you should, as a leader, try to understand and see and observe this, have an understanding that, oh, this looks like potentially can go downhill. So you're needing to use a completely different set of questions, some softer questions that might be, what does it take to not do something? Like really challenge them around, is your plate really full? Do you understand your plate is really full? Do you understand your energy is being expended? So I think that is something we as leadership and every leader and manager of high performers should be considering.
I'll add something to that. I fully subscribe to everything that y'all just said. And as in my own leadership and team leadership, there are like questions that have really helped me to stay tuned with that. And I especially ask them to the high performers. And I call them the 4 H's. How's your home and health? It's like things outside of work. That's the personal side. That's what can sometimes trigger burnout. And then how's your happiness and your, oh God, I forgot the last H, your long-term career path at work? Like how is that impacting you? And thinking about it from those 2 angles is how I start every single one-to-one with my team members, because then I understand there's something that could be impacting them outside of work, and how are they actually experiencing the work life? Is it okay? And asking this question to high performers, I find is a critical step because they won't talk about it typically. So you have the onus of prompting that. And then the second thing on the happiness at work, we do, regularly check in on career path and have a career lab so that they know what are the expectations. I think that's also very important. Not setting expectation means someone's just constantly seeking that reinforcement and they will never achieve because you cannot actually set a bar. And that's quite dangerous for a high performer. So setting clear goals and then checking back on those goals and making achievement related and not results oriented, I think is going back to what Adrian was saying about not being just look for this number and hit this number, which I think we love to do with OKRs and all that, but OKRs are not meant to be individual things. They're meant to be team and organizational goals, because those numbers don't get hit by individuals usually, unless maybe you have a sales target or something. But usually achievement is about what work did you do and how well did you do it. And that's what we want to be fostering as leaders and mentors, not do you achieve this result, because that's usually a combination of factors. And I find most of the time in really strong teams, that's not one individual doing that. So responsibilizing a person to hit a results-oriented number can actually be really dangerous and drive towards burnout, in my experience.
Yeah, and that actually brings us really well to the next sort of topic, which is how do we avoid burnout in high performance environments? And this is a key because, product, it's a high performance environment. It's typically we place lots of product people. They are high performers in their personal life, academically. They're what we would describe as upper quartile. They earn good money. And Liam just flashed up a graphic about 92% of product people say that they've experienced some form of burnout. So again, any thoughts on how do we avoid it?
I think we need to be able to first recognize it. And I know we started at what burnout is, but to me, it's not so much about the label, but recognizing the signs of burnout. And we've mentioned along this chat some of these signs, but these signs may vary depending on your team, on the context of your organization, on the type of projects you do, on the pace of the organization. And most recently, with new tools and adoption of AI, some of these signs may actually be even harder to spot now because of AI and AI-enabled teams. They operate fundamentally a little bit different from traditional teams. So spotting and knowing what the symptoms are that are true to your context and your team is very important. And some of these can be soft symptoms. I know we talk about the big ones, when someone's really exhausted, when someone's just really not performing. But small things might matter. Do you have psychological safety? Are your teams vocal? Have they suddenly gone really quiet? Have they suddenly feel detached from the conversations that you're trying to have? Are they struggling to make decisions that they didn't used to struggle before? There are some soft signals at the beginning of burnout that as leadership we need to be able to spot. Once you have these, then you can start naming this. You can put, if you want, a label. It might not be burnout. It could be something before burnout that we should be catching earlier. Your teams might be under a lot of stress. Your system might be broken. To what Adrian was saying, recognizing, is it a people problem or is it a system problem? So then you can start creating frameworks and structures and plans to address the problem that you're seeing.
Yeah, anybody else?
Yeah, an early sign of burnout especially is when people stop saying no and stop challenging and go quiet, don't feel that they have the autonomy and the ability and the psychological safety to be able to challenge on something that's being given to them. I think also systems can sometimes change even without the awareness of like leaders understanding it. If you don't realize that some other factor has been injected into the wider system that is now changing what you're supposed to be focused on. And I think that sort of constantly checking in of like, what are the things at play here, and are we ignoring something that's inconveniently changing the whole system? Like, that was a super vague way of saying, like, sometimes a new role can be hired in. It completely changes the amount of workload that a different individual who's buried into the organization will have to do, and so that new role creates work for another person who's 2 layers hidden from a senior person, and that person now can't handle what's been given to them, but it just doesn't get noticed because somebody else needed that role to make them feel better, so I mean, the system thinking part of this is huge. It's not, I understand there's probably people in the call who are like looking at, how do I avoid burnout for myself? And then there's, how do I avoid burnout for my teams? I think they're different things. Avoiding burnout for yourself, it's 100% put your own oxygen mask on, because don't expect to try to solve for the whole system. And then for your teams, make sure that you're really looking at all of the factors at play and not just an individual who might be having some extra challenges at home. Like, remember also a third thing, we're whole people. We are 3-dimensional beings. We're not just the people who show up on the Zoom calls or at work, at the desk, at the, in the meetings. We're also people who have home lives. We have families. We have elderly parents. We have health problems. We're masking our own neurodiversity for so long that we didn't know we were masking. Like, there are all of these things that make us whole 3-dimensional people. And those things are important to remember, that just your work is just one piece of that. It just might have an outsized impact on your identity, as that was, I think, for me, the biggest factor for my own burnout was my identity started to become what I was doing at work, instead of the 3-dimensional person that I truly am. So I think that's really important to make those two things distinct. It's not my responsibility to fix the system. It's my responsibility to understand myself and to feel who I am and what's going on with me first.
Yeah, and I think we touched earlier, some of us, on actually sometimes leadership, like, they're fine with the system. It's like squeeze the lemon for 2-3 years, accept there's churn, and this is masked in all sorts of language. It's like, I want someone whose career is in its ascendancy, or has the energy, or and I've heard it all. So again, what's your sort of view on that? Because again, I'm coming from a real point of ignorance here. Joining a recruitment company, accepting that you'll earn a stack, but in 3 years you're done, and then moving on. That's a real norm in recruitment. And I think, was it Adrian, you were saying that is in kind of, sometimes there's that view in product. So again, what's people's views there, that actually for tech leaders, scale ups, I think that's the easiest course. It's just like, well, it's fine, just change the people.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously there's going to be a degree of that, and as Adrian says, like, we can't necessarily change the system. But the biggest thing that I think people in product need to realize is that doing more doesn't make you more effective. You're more effective when you are thinking about strategy. What are the right problems to solve? Have we got the right data? Have I got the capacity to make the right decisions on an ongoing basis, so that things don't slip on a runaway train because I can't keep up with them, and then 2 months later I'm like, wait, why are we building that? So it's like, how do we get people to recognize that, one, like, pushing yourself to that maximum isn't actually helpful in the product space, and then two, how do we make sure as leaders we're having that conversation around how are you actually feeling, and we listen to the answer and we create the space for people to share that and truly act on it. And again, create the confidence as an individual that you feel like you can go and have those conversations and really say, hey, this is what's going on for me. I feel like I'm maybe not being as effective as I could be in these areas. These are the kind of things that I want support with. And you won't always get listened to. Sometimes you are in the wrong environment and you need to find other mentors, other people around you that support you with that. And you really need to recognize, if we're talking at an individual level, how much you should keep trying to drive something in that organization versus looking elsewhere where you might be a better fit.
I just want to add something from a leader perspective, that, like, you need to detect and you need to diagnose, and then you need to, like, take an action as far as, like, the process that you should be doing as a leader. So detection is really key. And I think most organizations only do, like, twice a year, maybe once a quarter, sort of, I'm sending out, like, the bat signal, tell me, how are we doing? And sometimes those questions are so vague, and it's really not specific enough to give you a real answer. So we still do that at SaaS Group. They do that, and it's very good. But, like, at Usersnap, I do a monthly, because our environment's changing so fast in tech and products that I find that, like, quarterly or twice yearly is not at all sufficient to really detect the team's health and well-being. So I ask them questions around our tools and processes, around their workload and their manager, around just how they're experiencing work in general. And these are all anonymous, so there's, like, no penalty for saying this is shit, right? And I love that about these responses. It really generates the ability to diagnose. So that's my tool for diagnose. I actually use Usersnap for that. I do internal surveys. They're completely public to everyone. They can see all the answers. I can see all the answers. I don't see the point in hiding that. If I do get negative responses, it's not just about detection anymore. It's about diagnosing. So I encourage the person who gave a low rating on something, please come talk to me, or come talk to the, like, SaaS Group HR person, or your manager or something. But, like, give us something to work with. And on several occasions, people have private messaged me and said, hey, this was me. I really want to fix this. And I've tried to create that environment where people who come to me get praised with complaints. And this really does trigger change in our organization. We've changed our process on how we work 2 times in the 2-year stint that I've been there. And it's only generated positive outcome for people, because it's when they signal, this isn't working for me, it's your job as a leader to empower them to make the changes that will help make that environment better. So having the ability to detect and diagnose, and then also fostering an environment of, like, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I really need people like you in this organization, using that kind of verbiage to encourage. And even in the all hands, the next time we have one, I will say, I really want to thank the person who came to me with this low rating and helped us work through it. Here's what we're doing about it. And really putting that on the page and showing that, not just saying, but showing that you're going to take action on the things driving the problem. This is the best way to build trust in an organization as a leader. And it also has a extremely positive outcome on the staff. They will work harder, but like, again, you balance that out with vacation policy and making sure you check in on people. But when it comes to solving problems that are within your control, really taking action and diagnosing that is critical path as a leader.
Yeah, it's interesting that you do this on a monthly cadence, because I think, pace of work has just changed dramatically in the last 30 years. What's expected of individuals has changed dramatically, but we're still on like yearly reviews or 6 monthly reviews, and then the outputs of that, it's another year. So yeah, that's super good, and it kind of brings us into the next topic quite easily, which is toxic environments versus individual factors. And I think we're going to get another graphic here from the team at some point. But yeah, I wanted to chat about, we've talked about this being systemic, but I also think individuals sometimes, just push themselves too hard. And we've got a couple of little diagrams here. 97% of people have been saying, product people were saying they feel such a responsibility to perform. 80% of people are saying it's an organizational pressure as well. So again, I'm super keen to hear people's views, opinions on that.
I don't know. I think the question is interesting. Sorry, Izzy, you want to go ahead?
Product teams, I think, really feel the pressure, especially product managers. Of course, it's a cross-functional team. A lot of people contribute to the success of something, but product managers are usually at the forefront of the yes, the no, and the why. And what has happened recently through more faster workflows, AI-enabled workflows, is we forgot to ask why. We totally stopped saying no, because we got just so excited about the new technology helping us move faster, and doing everything individually in our team, that we kind of got carried away. And it's especially true with more neurodivergent populations as well, which technology is very known for to have. It becomes a bit of an addiction, that success, that speed, that constant moving forward. And I don't think there is a lot of no that I'm hearing. People forgot to say no. And it contributes to that completely spiraling out of control, because nobody's saying, hold on, but why are we doing this? For what purpose? For what reason? We're asking, does it help move the boat faster? But it might, but for what reason? So we're creating a lot of noise ourselves, a lot of work ourselves that may not have high value. And we forgot to ask the why, and we forgot to say, no, we're not going to do this. Let's focus on this. So I think we've kind of have a big challenge around focus, about value, about how we measure success. To Shannon's point, what is the key result here? What are we all going to go and chase? That means we're not going to chase these other things that can be just noise. I find that so prevalent in product teams, especially tech-enabled teams right now, who are just let loose to explore different tools and move faster. And that's what they're encouraged by the system. So I think that is something that we absolutely need to manage and rail back, because the work needs to still have purpose.
I would like to maybe layer on top of that a little bit. It's not just the ability to do everything in every possible direction faster. It's also the fact that because we're able to do so much faster, run so many more experiments, and do so many prototypes without the hesitation of building, because it took many people to build something to actually see if it's going to work. With rapid prototyping, we take away some of that barrier for sure, but we also take away a bit of the certainty that comes from moving a bit more slowly, and the predictability that makes very senior leaders and financial leaders and board members feel comfortable that their business is safe. So I see more and more a desire to, in an environment that's becoming far less deterministic with AI. AI is inherently non-deterministic. It's going to change its answers between models and between questions, even from different people, based on a huge number of data points that we can't see. because it's non-deterministic, it means that the lack of a determinism already flows into what it can be predicted for even your guidance for if you're publicly traded. And I think that is a very uncomfortable space, which then creates this like dual pressure that meets in the middle, where I want absolute certainty about what you're going to deliver as a product team. But I also want almost absolute certainty on the results for that. And you're failing if you don't deliver that, both deliver the roadmap and the results. But also, I want you to be constantly innovating as quickly as you possibly can to find the next vein of gold that is going to make us have another round of hypergrowth. And I see this happening over and over and over again across every product person that I speak to in almost every industry that I've spoken to recently. And it's just kind of, you know, something's got to give. We've got to find something that is going to keep us from trying to pull everyone in every direction all the time, everything everywhere all at once.
But how much of this, because we've talked about it being systemic, and I think Izzy made a point earlier about sometimes environments just draw individuals who just want to chase that fix and who will burn themselves out. You know, it doesn't really matter what environment you put them in. They're just off like a dog after a hare, and they're gonna keep on going. So how do you, I mean, how much of that sort of, you know, A-type individual joining organizations contributes to the system side of it, and how do you, I guess, protect those people from themselves if that's what they want to do?
I always describe it as like this Venn diagram of product people, because it's like everyone applied for this job because it was like, I want to work in a high pressured environment where I get to deliver loads of value. And then you're in that environment where it's like, here are all the targets, and here are the OKRs, and here's the next big AI thing. And if you've got those two things working together, that is like the recipe for like pretty much definitely heading towards burnout. And I think you'll see it. You'll have these organizations where obviously not everyone in that organization burns out. And then you'll have some individuals that work in organizations where no one's burning out, but they are. So it's obviously a combination of the two factors. But if you put the two together, it's like a catalyst. And I think we need to be aware of that, because I think it impacts two things. One, if you've got a leader that's like that, they expect that from everyone else around them, and that can be really toxic. And two, if you're that person as the individual, you need to recognize that for yourself. And I think I speak for myself, but I'm probably sure that everyone on this call can say the same thing, that we've been through that, we've learned from it, and we've realized that we can't continue with those patterns and behaviors. I was reading a book recently called Tiny Experiments. And the theory that she was talking about was about being good at being in the top 10% over a 10-year period versus trying to be in the top 1% in a 1-year period. And I think so many people optimize for like, how can I get these results ASAP, as opposed to going, well, how can I optimize my overall life so that this is sustainable, so that I can keep delivering strong results, so that I can do it at a pace that is good, that's aligned with me, where I'm not sacrificing myself to get there. And I think if we can recognize that as individuals, you can still be successful in these environments, but you're a lot more strategic about it, as opposed to going down like the tactical quick wins where you just want to deliver more, improve yourself, and then probably burn out. So there's definitely a recognition piece. And then the bigger part that I will say to that is, so much of that behavior comes from people being high performers throughout their whole life, from like school through university, through starting their careers. It's a big transition for a lot of people, because they feel like they're not doing enough if they're not pushing themselves to the extreme. And people need to go through that phase of getting comfortable with that and showing that they'll still do well. And then they can start to drive that long-term performance.
I'd like to call out
Shannon, you were going to say something, I think, about the relentlessness of the system at times.
There's an elephant in the room that I want to like point at, and that is that AI is speeding up delivery time. And this is creating new bottlenecks. And the bottleneck is now falling on the product team most of the time. Like engineers being able to use AI systems and tools to churn out code faster means that we don't have to wait so much for development. While this looks wonderful on paper, what it does is create pressure. Where we could spend more time compiling, analyzing, thinking, the leadership expectation is now, you better be at their pace. And we can also use AI for these things, and we should, and we do. However, we absolutely have to stop this build trap of velocity being the main regulator, the main evaluation of performance. We need to keep the pressure on outcome, and we need to keep talking about, was this the right thing to build, and not just, did we build enough? So I really want to go back to like the Build Trap as one of the key books of our time. It has now more than ever, I think, brought awareness to intelligent product leaders that it's not about how much you're doing, it's still about doing the right things. And if you want to avoid pressure in your team, involve the engineers in the creative process of selection and evaluation of your opportunities, and utilize their creative skills, because that's what humans do very well, and where I think AI really falls short. AI is built on a system of pre-existing information. Innovation is obviously going to be difficult. For it to conceive things that haven't yet been done is sometimes one of its limitations, and it's one of the things where human plus AI can be amazing. So I think we should use AI as a tool, and we should use it as a means of creative stimulus. But we do not, as leaders, do our teams favors by just expecting more and more and more because this tool is available. There still needs to be an onus, and there still needs to be some time to process, is this the right thing? So I find times I am slowing down some of these processes and involving those engineers who maybe wrote all the code and they have a little bit of time. I'm pulling them back into this creative process with product design, engineering, and data in order to amplify the output that we're going to get from our creative discussions. It's a great way to use the team and prevent this bottleneck from forming on the product team.
Yeah, and that brings us to the next bit, which is, again, we should have another graphic coming up shortly. How do we spot signs of burnout in the team? And so we've got typically people who've gone through burnout, or job joiners. You have a honeymoon phase, then there's a little bit of an onset of stress. That stress becomes chronic, where there's changes in stress levels, more intense symptoms. It hits burnout, where somebody's finding it difficult to cope, and you then have habitual burnout, where people get kind of just stuck in this loop where they're constantly exhausted, they're constantly showing all these bad signs. So how do we spot signs of this in people, and what do we do about it? Somebody?
Well, I think the really scary thing about that is that when you finally see those symptoms, when things start to really show up, the physical symptoms, you're already down by number 4 on that round. Like, so it's almost the honeymoon phase. It doesn't necessarily have to be a honeymoon phase. It can literally be like, finding out how to find periods of flow and joy, and then recovery and flow and joy. It's like when you see the honeymoon phase, go, okay, now take a break and enjoy, because we want you back in this state again. I want to be back in this state again. And I think it's trying to figure out how to, someone once told me, actually it was John Amici. I don't know if he's kind of famous in the UK. He's on morning television sometimes. He is a coach of this nature, and he said that resilience can come from trauma. But we often talk about resilience being the thing we want to establish in teams. And I think it's more like the flexibility and the ability to bend and the ability to change, and understand that, yes, the honeymoon phase is going to end. You know it while it's happening. You're okay with that. You know it can come back again. I think this is kind of goes way beyond burnout to just like the level of work and constant relentless information onslaught that we're exposed to as human beings in this day and age. We need to almost be all constantly looking at how we can preserve that honeymoon phase before it gets to the point where you're in a cycle of 4 and 5.
I think stress is good for teams. I genuinely believe that, especially certain teams, they perform really well under stress. I think the problem then becomes, is sustainable stress, how sustainable that is. And so having some pressure on the team helps them deliver. But to know where we cross the line, we really need to know our team and the system they perform. So I think as a leader, you need to know both really well. And then Shannon talked about how she talks to her people, and really knowing your people is something the leaders cannot go without. I think it's not just about the official performance review. Forget those. That's like an archaic way to know our people, right? We cannot know our people just by once a year 360 review. We need to know them every day, in and out, how they react to things, how they perform under different circumstances, within different contexts. We are responsible for their growth and development and how we build them up to help scale or to help them grow and tackle bigger problems that they need to do as part of their kind of achievement and self-awareness. So one of the biggest barriers I find is that leaders genuinely don't know their teams that well. And it's a big thing that needs to become part of who you are as a leader. You need to find a way to get you know, regardless of how big a size that team is, you need to find and have a system to bring you closer to knowing who they are. One size will never fit all. As coaches and leaders, we know that you would need to flex for some of your people in the team and give them a different type of support that they may need. And then you have your high performers that you need to be kind of checking in a different way with them. So being able to coach, mentor, and lead, and also build systems around is an absolute must toolbox for any leader that is going to be able to then realistically spot those signs and know when their teams are crossing the line of continuous stress that would lead them to burnout. To say you can fix burnout, you're already too late, like Adrian said. Like, you don't want your team to get there. You want to prevent that from happening. And for me, it's conversation, regular check-ins, really meaningful conversations, psychological safety, and talking about getting feedback from others around people, because you won't get everyone being able to build a rapport with you as a leader in a meaningful way at the same time. It takes time, it takes effort. And it's true for us. We need to make that time. And the system needs to allow for us to make that time in a meaningful way.
I want to add a tactic onto everything that Izzy is saying. In addition to like knowing people and their state and their health and how things are going outside of work and inside of work, there is a very meaningful and easy to track method to understand capacity, which I think is super useful. One thing that I've done, I think all leaders have done this at some point, like you kind of try and see where's the limit. You let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, to find out what's the right capacity. So that's why I'd like the monthly surveys, to make sure that we're not overdoing the number of concurrent projects and things like that. But I also do what I call the look back. I take our engineering manager aside and say, how many projects do we deliver in the last 3 months? What was the stack month over month of those projects and how big were they? We really look at a quarterly basis, like what was the delivery rate of the team. And a lot of people are like, yeah, points and agile and whatever. I'm like, too much work. I just look at how many mediums, how many smalls, how many larges. And I do this on a regular basis to find out what is the capacity of the team. Is the capacity increasing, decreasing? Is it changing? Because staffing changes as well. So you have to look at that on a regular cadence to understand, are we delivering at the right pace? And if your team size changes, you have to adapt that concurrently. So we have a cap on the number of projects that we are willing to do at a single moment. AI, no AI. I don't want to overload someone's brain, one person doing 4 projects in 1 quarter. If they're all mediums, like this might be too much. So I look at the size, I look at the number, and we go back and we look at, was this, similar to the last few quarters? Has our capacity in the team changed? Do we need to adjust? And we adjust that cap accordingly to make sure that we're not overloading the team. If you do not track this in the product space as a product manager or a product leader, if you're not looking at how many concurrent projects is this team delivering and how many should they be delivering, you're setting them up to fail. And I think this is a key problem that product leaders have, is expectations raise because pressure raises. And we don't look at, like, over the last few quarters, we delivered 9, 10, 9, 10. Now we're asking them to do 13. But we haven't increased our capacity of humans. So is this even correct? So people have limits, and neurodivergence can also compound that. People with ADHD or ADHD do have tendencies to want to work in certain ways. And if you have those people on your team, I think that you should be respectful of those tendencies and not expect neurodivergents to behave as neurotypical or vice versa. They both have strengths. They both have limits, and you need to recognize not just how they're doing, how they are, but what is the capacity, and are you respecting that?
And Evie, you do loads of coaching, I know, on burnout. Have you got any views on sort of spotting, or we're almost in sort of early prevention and having an environment that, so how do you coach people who've burnt out? How do you sort of get them to be self-aware so that they can self-manage, I guess, for the future?
Yeah, I mean, the top thing that I get people to do, which I still do on a regular basis, is just do a regular reflection as to like, what was my stress score out of 10 this week? How was I feeling overall? And just by doing that, as opposed to these things slipping and slipping and slipping, and often we'll be like, oh, well, I just need to get this thing out the door. So like 2 weeks and then I'll be okay. And that's fine, as long as you're having that regular check-in with yourself where you can go, okay, like I said, I was going to get to the end of this 2 weeks. Like, how do I then make some tweaks from here to get things back on track? And those constant small adjustments of like, actually, I didn't take a lunch break this week. Like, I didn't go to the gym when I said I was going to. They're the things that allow you to like make the adjustments sooner, as opposed to it all slipping away and you not realizing. There's also a really good concept called the window of tolerance. And I get people to go and map that out for themselves, where you basically think about like, well, what makes me thrive? When am I at my highest performing? And like, when am I starting to see these signs of stress and burnout? And if you have that for yourself, you'll really know, like, it goes back to what we were saying about the honeymoon phase. I think we so often are talking about like, how do we prevent burnout? But really the best conversation would be, how am I optimizing to always be as high performing as possible? And so much of that comes from like doing the journaling, doing the meditation, going to the gym, taking the walks, taking the lunch breaks, because you carve out that space to come back fresher. So I try and shift people to think more about, how do I get into that state, as opposed to just, how do I make sure I don't burn out?
Yeah, thank you for that, Evie. And I think we've almost covered that, unless anybody else has got something to add, because we've got some questions coming from the floor. So I think if there's anyone's there that anyone wants to sort of cover, please just go for it. But I thought Q3 was really good. If you could change one thing about product organizations, about how they operate to reduce burnout, what would it be? Go on, Izzy.
Yeah, there could be a million, so it's so hard.
Go on, pick one.
The one that I would say is just having crystal clear priorities.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean everything's a priority. It does mean that we've said, okay, these are the top 3 things we want to deliver. Like, put people's effort on that, and don't try and then squeeze in extra pieces of sand here and there as well.
Okay. And
I will say, make sure that you make it clear, what does it cost to do something? So make the cost of work of your team visible. And that is just, I don't mean the monetary value. I mean, what does it take for your team to do that? The capacity that Shannon mentioned, anything, delivery, throughput, system, processes, what is it that it costs for your team to deliver? And you need to be surfacing this very clearly across the organizations.
Yeah, I would add on to what you both said, like understanding priorities and cost. I think that goes down to prioritization as well. I would say before you can do that work appropriately, the leaders must take responsibility for setting proper strategy. If you have not provided clarity on how to prioritize for impact, then you're asking your team to do everything, asking them to do acquisition, activation, retention, and churn reduction, all things conversion. You're asking them to tackle all of those things at the same time. So what I tend to really try and do in every single big quarterly discussion about like, where are we taking our product? What is our big splash going to be in this time frame? I try to pick no more than 2 areas of strategic focus, usually based on what we're seeing, the signals of the business. Where is the big problem is how I like to start these prioritization questions going into the new quarter. It's like, okay, team, we're here to prioritize. What's the problem in our business right now that we must address? And that empowers and enables the product team to actually make prioritization choices around impact. Impact is so nefarious and so vague. You have to like categorize it a bit more and give them something to show impact around first. Usually pick one of those 4 metrics plus platform. It could be scalability, compliance, security, or something non-functional that empowers the business to continue to grow, because at some point it's going to become your limiting impact. So I think that those are the different categories to look at. 2, no more than 2, depending on the size of the team. But for one team, giving them, 4 or 5 different areas of impact and saying, go prioritize, you're just basically setting them up to fail. So I would look at limiting and providing guidance top down first, which empowers them to be bottom up decision makers.
And Adrian, did you have a thing about one thing you'd change or suggest?
I think it's been a bit touched on, but there's probably more than one thing. I think it's a systemic thing. In very large organizations, you need to have alignment across your senior leadership that they understand what each thing that they are incentivizing within their own teams needs to be compatible with one another. So you're not asking the same set of resources to serve 2 different intentions or 2 different goals that have the equal priority depending upon which org you're sitting in. Purpose-built teams that really truly understanding the purpose of the team, thinking in terms of what part of the stack they're working in. Are they a slow-moving or highly dynamic? Are they a feature team versus a platform team? And not asking them to run up and down a context switch within that stack, which I think can produce a myriad of unpleasant outcomes, especially in very, very large organizations. I'm talking like if you've got 500 to 1,000 people who are all working toward a set of goals, and they need to collaborate with one another, it can descend into chaos and entropy pretty quickly. And then acknowledging that sometimes you need to just not expect everyone to understand everything all the time. So being able to create pods or areas that can focus and to know what they're stopping. So prioritize what you're going to optimize, what you're going to protect, and what you're going to sub-optimize, and having that be super clear at any given moment, and being able to cycle through those things and make those adjustments from the top down, so the bottom up understands what they're working with and can keep going.
Right.
So more than one thing.
It's fine. Well, if everyone wants to look and see if they want to pick another question, I'll just summarize that. If we change one thing, there'd be prioritization, costing everything, including human cost, leadership taking responsibility, and also alignment across leadership and product, specific teams for different products. We've got about 4 minutes. So was there another question that anybody particularly wanted to pick up on?
I'll take one. And I think it's more an art than a science. Like, I think you can do what Shannon was saying and like work out projects, etc., etc. But at a more individual level, I think it's so much about having that conversation and knowing what motivates people. How can you set those targets? And people can set these themselves as well, where it feels like it's a stretch that you're having those conversations and people feel like they've got something to work towards, but not to the point where you're constantly making demands of them. And that's where I think it needs to be that open 2-way conversation around like, what are you motivated by? What feels like it's achievable, but still feels like you're going to be proud when you've achieved those things, versus, oh, I know we set all of those things, but can you also do this as well? And that's typically when it starts to slide into the unhealthy space.
Okay. So, right, another question then, final one. As product leaders, how do we distinguish between healthy pressure and the kind of pressure that leads to burnout? What are our thoughts there? Izzy, you're smiling. Come on.
It really comes down to truly knowing your team and what they're capable of and how much you can stretch them. And that just comes through time, working with them, trying things, getting feedback. Feedback loops are so important with your team and within the other teams around your team as well. So the more you know your team, the more you'll be able to understand what that line is. And don't be afraid to push them. I don't want this to sound like we need to cotton wool our teams. That is not the point here. The point is to truly understand what they're capable of and what they can be capable of, so that you can first create great development processes so they can grow, learn, and be better within whatever better means to them and the organization. But really understand where the limits is, and just don't be afraid to push them, but get the feedback, take that as data, then take a step back, give them time to recover, and then go again. So the cycle must have recovery in it and must have a feedback loop and data points that help you as a leader to get them to where you want them to be. And that could be through growth, development, changing system, augmenting the system, augmenting your team. Don't be afraid as a leader to go and look for different skills that your team doesn't have. this is not just protecting the team. This is us reacting to the context and the goals of the organization. And so we have different levers to pull. It's never one size and it's never one lever only.
Okay.
I want to add one thing that's actually extremely difficult, and that is when you've got the wrong person in the wrong seat for the role. And this can absolutely happen sometimes. And I've had to make that hard call a few times in my career. You can see someone struggling, and you know that it's just not the right fit for them based on what you know about their goals, their capacity, their speed of work, the way they work, what their knowledge, whatever things going on in their personal life. There could be many reasons for this. And it's not necessarily like a failure on your ability to find the right person. It could, again, be a change that happened en route. But I think what is important is to recognize that burnout can happen in those situations because this person is not the right fit for what you're needing from them or what the organization expects from them. And when you're in that situation, I think it's really important not to blame the individual, but rather to ask them the question of like, how do you feel about this long term? Do you think this is the right thing for you long term? And give them some data points to work with, like, this is this, this is this, this is this. You told me this is what you wanted, and go through their talking points and really highlight the mismatch between their vision of what works for them as an individual or as a performer, and really point out where you see the mismatch and ask the question. And then you need to trust their answer. It's not about, well, I think you're wrong and we should end this. But I get like two things happen. 50% of the time, the person will say, yep, that's a mismatch and I don't want it. And you have an easier job of saying, okay, how do we proceed? And my favorite way to proceed is like 3-month timelines, severance, and that gives you runway to hire in a new recruit. I usually do some sort of recommendation. I try and connect them to people. I say, where are you going? How do we set you up for your next career jump? I give them that opportunity. You wanted to do this. Let's give you that for the next 3 months. Go do that mission while I recruit your replacement. That way you have job experience and you're ready to go. And they have time and energy and motivation to find their step. And if they don't recognize that, and they continue to feel like, no, I want this, then you set a performance-based goal and you say, okay, you want this. This is the outcome that we're looking for as a team. And this is your work achievement towards that goal. And I want to see this consistently. And if they're not delivering it consistently, then you have a hard conversation. Right. But at least you're giving time and data and means and trust to do it. And you're not just saying, this won't work, you're fired. And I think that's the worst way to tell it.
Yeah. I think the resistance to that, Shannon, would be if somebody is the wage earner for the house. And they, you know, I could imagine doing a role that I was struggling with because of a misalignment. But if I'm the wage earner, that the fear of sort of saying, okay, you're right, this isn't right for me. I've got a 3-month runway, but at the end of that 3-month runway, I don't have another job. Then the house has gone. So that's, yeah, I feel you, but I think that's where the resistance would come from. People feeling trapped almost, perhaps. But
well, you can also shift people out. I've done this several times, even at Usersnap. I've changed people's roles several times, and I've seen low performers from high performers. So you change the workload, you change the role, you put them in another seat on the same bus. And you try it out. You see, that's another way. If this person, or contractually, if there's not a means as a leader to break that contract, move them, give them a different challenge, something that might make them successful. I've had people move from marketing to CS. Marketing, they were good. CS, they were amazing. So I mean, things like that, and I have that luxury as a CEO and not just in product, but you can give people other challenges in the product space and help them in their path as well.
Absolutely. So I think we've almost come to the end. So thank you very much for all of your time and your amazing insight as well. This has been a massive learning curve. Is there anything, final things people would like to say, or is there anything we've missed here at all?
Just thank you. It was really nice to spend some time with everyone. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Adrian.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
It's a great conversation.
Discussion, yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Well, look, thank you all. I'll reach out at another time. But again, thank you so much all for your time. I've really appreciated it. It's been great. It's been genuinely great. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye.